Meenakshi ji,
Yes, Vinay ji.
Do we have to do 90 minutes or would it be okay if it extends a little more or shrinks a little more?
We will be flexible, Vinay ji.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
No, we do. It's all right, Vinay ji, if it goes up and down.
Yeah.
Bhai Sahab, namaste.
Bandhuji, namaskar. Are you back?
Yes, just today.
Okay.
आपको किसने बताया?
आप ही ने बताया था।
अच्छा,
आप पुर्तगाल वगैरह घूमने जा रहे हैं?
हाँ, हम पुर्तगाल घूम गए थे।
और स्विट्जरलैंड भी?
हाँ जी।
So did you say hello to Alps?
Yes. We went to Spain, spent more time in Spain and Portugal than Switzerland.
Okay.
Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, I can see you, James.
Okay.
Yes, James, we can hear you and see you.
Okay.
Meenakshi, tell us when you would want us to start.
As soon as you're ready.
Yeah, we are both ready.
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. Good afternoon, James. Though at my place it is good evening.
Oh.
I had seen your first book a long time ago, and I had admired how you have sort of created space for Hindu astrology in the minds of the Western astrologer. So my first question is, when did you start learning astrology?
I'm sorry, the computer did something weird. Say it again.
When did you start learning astrology? What was your age at that time?
Well, I was about 27. It was in Western astrology. And I studied Western astrology for about 4 or 5 years, but I was not an astrologer. I didn't want to become a professional because the predictive element of the natal horoscope was really lacking. It was very good. Western astrology was very good for predicting the future. In fact, I got into astrology because I was going through a divorce that there were two Western astrology women. One of them predicted divorce, the divorce. The other one predicted what would happen as the divorce proceedings went on. So I got into astrology because the predictive element was so wonderful for the future. But when I started studying horoscopes for the natal horoscope, I couldn't tell how many children, I couldn't tell what the career was, I couldn't. So when I hit the Rahu Dasha, around the age of, I guess, 28 or 29, that's when I got divorced, my father died, and I was depressed for a couple of years. So I went to India because I said, I've always wanted to go to India and I'm depressed, there's nothing going on. So I went to India and I brought 25 horoscopes with me of loved ones and friends. And people said, are you going to learn Hindu astrology? I said, well, if it's possible, yes, but I don't think it's possible because I've read the books and I can't make heads or tails of them. I went around India traveling for 10 weeks out of a 12-week visa, 10 weeks. 2 weeks before I was set to go home, I did not have my ephemeris with me, but 2 weeks before I was set to go home, Jupiter, I believe, hit my 7th house cusp. And I woke up in Delhi. I had 2 weeks left, and I had this insane thought. I'm going to get the Hindu astrology books. I'm going to go to Rishikesh. I'm going to stay in a cave for 2 weeks, and I'm going to study this. It was ridiculous. But I get to Ranjan Publications, and the man sees me picking up all the classics, and he comes over, and he says, young man, can I ask, what are you doing? I said, well, I want to learn this. He says, you can't learn this from books, but I have someone for you. And so he sends me to R. Santanam, who was just becoming famous for having translated scriptures.
Yes.
He said, how long can you stay? I said, well, I can extend my visa for 4 weeks. So for 6 weeks, we studied every night, 2 hours a night and 4 hours on Sunday. I went home. I used the system for a year and a half, but occasionally I would make mistakes something was wrong. And I ran into an old friend from high school. I said, oh, let me do your chart. Now we were 30, 32, 33. I said, let me do your horoscope. I hadn't seen him since high school. I'm doing the chart. Everything's going well. And I'm using Hindu and I'm also using Western. I use both. But I favor the Hindu. So then I said, oh, here's a period 2.5 years ago. This looks like a good period. He said, really? That's when I tried to commit suicide. The next day, I picked up the phone. I said, I called the travel agency. I said, get me a plane flight to India. I'm going back. I couldn't take it. So I went back and I landed in Bombay, but I had learned in the north, even though my teacher was from the south. Santanam was from the south. But,
yes.
But I learned in the north. But I wanted to go to Pondicherry and Bangalore. I wanted to go to the South India and find astrologers there. But the first day in Bombay, I went to a tourist bungalow and I said, do you have a list of ashrams? I want to see if I can find some astrologers. She said, well, we have a list of astrologers. I said, oh, give me the list of astrologers. So I went to this, she said, you better call first because these people are famous. I called up and I set an appointment to see Ghanshyam Joshi. And when I got there were 8 astrologers in the room. I said, what is this? He said, well, because I had told him I'm a Western astrologer practicing Jyotish in America. So he called all the local astrologers. Padia, after about 7-8 minutes, Padia takes my chart. He says, you got married at 21 or 23. And I said, how did he know this? I didn't show him the dashas. I had been in the Mars dasha, Mars ruling the 7th house. He said transits. I always use transits. So he calculated in his head. This was already 1982. I was married in 75. He just calculated in his head the transits of Jupiter aspecting the 7th house and the 7th ruler. I said, that's the man I want to study with. And then when I came home, see, from Santanam, I learned the basics, the technical. From Padia, he was strictly an astrologer. He was not a scholar, but he was brilliant. He's still alive. He's in Bombay. And he's brilliant at what he does. When I came back the second time, I immediately started to write down what I was learning. And as soon as I saw what I was writing down, I said, this looks like a book. But I wrote that book in 1985. It came out in 86. But over the years, I was very distraught about, when I wrote the book, I'd only been doing Jyotish for 2-3 years. And so much of what I wrote was taken from what other authors said. I used my own judgment, but what other people said. And as the years went by, I found it to be too negative and too much. Anything in the 8th house is bad. Anything in the 12th house is bad. Well, the 8th house is where you see astrologers and bankers. The 12th house is where you see people who are pursuing moksha. So I was really dying to get a hold of this and revise it. So I spent the entire year 2020 revising that book. I completely revamped the section on famous horoscopes because my experience after 35 years of practice is completely different. So I added 200 pages to that book, and it's revised and advanced now.
So what made you start writing Braha Sutras? It so similarly sounds with the Brihat Parashar Hora Shastra or Gemini Sutrams.
Wait a minute.
Or a friend of mine wrote a book called Ganesh Hora Shastra after his own name. So this one sounds quite in the same league.
Wait a minute. Let me tell you something. When I finally wrote the book and it was out, I went to Amazon and I put in the Braha Sutras, and 30 pictures of the Brahma Sutras came up. And I said, oh, this is a nightmare. How are people going to find my book? So I called Amazon. They said, well, when people start clicking on your book, it'll switch. So now it's switched. So the way the book came about was this. First of all, I have 216 sutras in the book. There's the being, the doing,
yes,
the nodes, the predictions, the clients. The very beginning sutra for the doing is, because I consider it most important, the foundation of a horoscope is the combination of the ascendant, the moon, and the sun. They form the foundation of every horoscope. And if they are all strong, then a person has a very, very easy path through life because their confidence is strong. If 2 of them are strong and 1 of them is weak, maybe the ascendant is strong, the sun is strong, but the moon is weak, it's still pretty good. But sometimes you get the triple crown. I got the triple crown. I got all bad. The moon is in the 12th house. The ascendant ruler is right next to Ketu within 2 degrees. And the sun is in the last degree of a sign, 1 degree away from the sun in Libra.
yeah.
So I got the triple loss on the foundation.
Your horoscope is right in front of me.
Yes.
And I was amazed to look at it, that how could you not be an astrologer, and especially a teacher astrologer? Something that you haven't written in your book really comes out very strongly, and that is that your Jupiter at 14 degrees is being aspected by Mars at 14 degrees and Saturn at 14 degrees. So the 3 degrees, which, I mean, they are the same. So the connection between Jupiter and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn is extremely strong because their degrees are 14 something.
Yeah.
So besides, of course, a lot of other things going on, but this is marvelous. So if moon is in the 12th house, from the moon, Jupiter is in the 12th house.
So let me finish the story.
Yeah.
So when you have a very weak foundation, see, I have, what you said is true. My career house is magnificent, and my 9th house is magnificent because the 9th and 10th ruler Saturn are aspected by Jupiter to the exact degree. So my 9th house and 10th house are spectacular. So I have fame all over the world from astrology, but the foundation of confidence is on the bottom because they're all weak. And so I don't give conferences very often because I find it to be very, very stressful. So I hadn't given a conference for 10, 12, 13 years. And then I decided to go to do this conference. Well, I spent a year working on a 4-hour conference and a 1-hour lecture. I spent a year on that. When I was done, I said, you have enough material for a book. So I started to write down what I had been teaching, which were tips. It was going to be called 500, it was going to be called Vedic Astrology 200 Tips. That was the title. But what happened was I was helping out a student who had done some proofreading for my previous book. I said, let me pay you. He says, no, I don't want money. I said, well, I'll give you some lessons. So I give him some lessons. And after the third session, I said, are you getting anything? Are you learning from this? He said, oh my God, I have a file in my computer filled. It's called the Braha Sutras. And I laughed and I laughed and I laughed. And then I thought, you know, that's a much better title. And it's a better title. It's not a better title for sales. People don't know what the Braha Sutras is. They'll find out as the word gets out. But it's a better title because then I could write everything that I wanted to write, not just astrological, but also other things that I've learned in my life that would help people. So I began to write the Braha Sutras. And what happened was, of course, I took the tips that I had taught in the workshop, which were basically, you know, I was trying to give them knowledge that it's taken me 40 years to learn. So the Braha Sutras is about all these different issues that people are confused about or they have different opinions about. And so the book is completely my experience. So everybody who's reading the book now, they're saying, wow, this is practical experience. And people are saying, this book is taking 5 or 10 years off of my process because there's so many things I haven't been able to figure out. And this guy has already been there and learned through the experience. So there's all kinds of sutras in there of things like, for example, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. This is something Padya taught me in 1984. But people have a hard time knowing how to use Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha because you have the natal horoscope, which might be completely spiritual. You might have Ketu on the ascendant, the moon in the 12th house. It might be completely spiritual. But when you're looking at the Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, which is the 1st, 5th, and 9th houses are Dharma, 2, 6, and 10 are money, Artha, 3, 7, 11 are desires. So they're looking and they're finding, oh, the 11th house and the 3rd house and the 7th, they're all very prominent. This is all about Kama, desires. But they're failing to look at the horoscope as a whole separate from that issue. So the person could be extremely spiritual and yet have big desires to do something. Or they could be completely spiritual, but want to have a big spiritual movement. So this is a sutra. Another sutra is, I'd seen astrologers, they would say, oh, you're in Saturn dasha, and Saturn is aspecting that house, so that house is going to be in trouble. So this is something that what's going on? Is someone typing? Hello? Yeah, somebody was typing. I don't know, what was that about? Anyway, so I used to struggle with, does a dasha planet throw aspects in its dasha? And this is something I struggled with for decades. And then I realized it's impossible that they would be throwing aspects, because if you had a fallen planet, say Venus is in Virgo and it's in the 9th house and it's fallen in the worst degree of fall, you would predict a very bad dasha for 20 years during that dasha for 9th house matters. Now, if planets were to throw aspects during their dasha, then I would have to advise the client, you're going to have big troubles with foreigners, big troubles with religion and philosophy. but your third house is going to be spectacular because the fallen Venus will throw the aspect onto the exalted Pisces, but it doesn't work that way. So these are sutras, these are things that I've learned over decades that I'm trying to impart to people so they don't have to go through the same long process that I went through. Did you receive a copy of the book?
I did. Thank you very much. And I can't say that I have read the whole of it.
No, well,
I have
it's 500
it through.
pages.
Yeah, it's a 500 pages book.
Yeah.
And I wondered, how could you write 216, whereas for an ordinary person, even a 108 would have been difficult.
Let me tell you partly how that happened. I probably had 100 or 120 or 30 points. But you see, I would do my writing in the morning and then I would do my readings in the afternoon. So I would be doing a reading in the afternoon and the client would be a student of astrology and they would say something stupid like, Rahu's in the first house, but look, Rahu's aspecting the seventh. I'd say, no, that's impossible. If Rahu's in the first and Ketu's in the seventh, Ketu is going to be the seventh. Rahu and Ketu throw aspects on the fifth and the ninth, but they don't aspect the other house. It's ridiculous. So I would say people need to know this. So I put this in the book. So people would say things that were not accurate. And so I would then include that in the book, because if this person was telling me that, they didn't understand something or they were getting it wrong, I know that other people are also getting that wrong. And then, for example, there's a sutra in there. When a planet is conjunct a very highly exalted, when a planet is conjunct a benefic that is fallen. So let's say that you have Jupiter and it's right next to fallen Venus. Is Jupiter going to be harmed because the Venus is fallen, or is it going to be strengthened because Venus is a benefic? And this is something after 40 years of practice, I will tell you, I call that a wild card. Sometimes a planet conjunct fallen Mercury will be terrible, and sometimes it'll benefit from Mercury. Sometimes a planet right next to fallen Venus will benefit because Venus is a benefic, and sometimes it will be harmed because Venus is in Virgo, fallen. So these are things that, that I've seen over decades of practice. So that's really what the book is about.
You have mentioned in your book that you were not particularly worried about or impressed by a debilitated Jupiter or a debilitated Saturn.
No. I was not impressed by exalted Saturn. Does not usually give.
Exalted Saturn and debilitated Jupiter.
Right. The fallen Jupiter, it rarely causes the kind of problems that I would have expected. And this took me decades to realize through experience. It just doesn't create the kind of
What do you say to the debilitation of Mars, which happens in Cancer,
terrible.
which is a French sign? Similarly, Mercury, which is in its father's sign, it gets debilitated. Venus gets debilitated in its friend's Mercury's sign. What do you say about that?
I go by the experience of it. The friends and the enemies do not mean a lot to me because I have seen, look, Venus and Saturn are friends. With friends like Saturn, who needs enemies? So the friends and the enemies, you see very little of that in my books because it does not produce what it's supposed to produce. I'm an astrologer that I don't care what other teachers have said. I don't care what the scriptures have said. I go by the experience. And I've never had much luck with the friends and enemies. It's been very low on the list of if a planet's fallen, it's bad. And if it's fallen close to its highest degree, its worst degree of fall, it's horrible. And if a planet's exalted, it's great. And if it's exalted to the highest degree, it's even better. But the friends and enemies has never impressed me.
I must say that in your book, the Braha Sutras, you have very boldly and emphatically written quite a few things, which may be at variance with some classics, especially the Brihad Parashara Shastra. And you said earlier that you lacked confidence because the tripod on which the horoscope is standing, the Lagna, the sun, the moon, they were weak. Where did you get the strength to write things so emphatically?
My wife is laughing. My wife is laughing in the background. Do you know why? You know why? I have one sutra in that book. I'm not going to say what it is, but it so contradicts everything.
Yes.
But you see, my Jupiter-Saturn, Saturn, they aspect each other to the degree.
Yeah.
My life is all about the truth. So the truth is most important. My wife is laughing because after the book came out, I said, how could you let me write what I wrote? Do you know what I have to face now? The people that are going to be angry about something that contradicted. But I did a video a week ago, and I told the woman, I said, look, what I'm talking about is going to be very, very controversial. And she said, if there's a problem, I will delete it. I'll delete the video. I said, do not delete that video. I don't care if I do not care if I never sell one more copy of this book. I am more concerned with the truth. I never got rich from astrology, so I'm not writing books because they make me rich. I'm writing to say what I believe the truth is. Now, I'm not God. These are not God's sutras. These are the Braha sutras. I know I've probably got some things wrong. There's 216, but I'm going to tell you, my wife said to me when I was writing the sutra that was very controversial, she said, James, stop. They don't care. The students don't care if you contradict. They want to know your experience and they want to know your opinion. So I seem very bold and the statements come out very bold. Then I go into my bedroom and I say, why did I do that? Oh God, I'm going to be in trouble.
But I must admire that you have really stuck your neck out and made those very bold statements.
What is it?
I truly admire that.
So what? I mean, look,
yeah.
Let me tell you, I watch the politicians on television every day and they lie. And I say, look, I know there's a price to pay if you stand up and tell the truth. You might get voted out of office. What's more important, staying in office or the truth? So when you read the Braha Sutras, you're going to get my experience over 40 years, take it or leave it. And in the introduction, I actually say, these are not God's sutras, they are Braha Sutras. And I say, quote, if some of my statements disagree with your experience, glory, hallelujah. You have followed my advice to follow your truth and your experience. But if your opinions are varying from mine because you're following some scripture, some teacher, some teaching, that's not good. You have to learn it through your experience. And the book is the result of 40 years. It's done over 10,000 horoscopes. And the very last sutra, if you go to Sutra 216, I talk about everything that I don't know, that I still haven't figured out and probably never will figure out. This is a very brutal field. And here's the biggest trouble with Jyotish. You use the BV Raman Ayanamsha instead of Lahiri. Why do you do that? Because it works. You use the Shilpand Ayanamsha instead of BV Raman. Why do you use it? Because it works. So we all have these opinions about what we find working. And the truth of it is, a lot of astrologers, we're all gullible because we are dealing with something which is beyond the five senses. And if teacher tells us this is how it is, people say Rahu is like Saturn and Mars is like Ketu. This is so ridiculous. It is just utterly ridiculous, but the scriptures say it. And they are similar because Saturn is 19 years and Rahu's 18 and Mars is 7 and Ketu is 7. They're similar in that way, but that's where the similarities end. But yet you have astrologers, they read what is written and they tell the client, oh, you're in Rahu Dasha, this is going to be just like Saturn. It's ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
So I've never done astrology that way. I've always, and I tell you what, I never disagreed with Santanam because I was just beginning to learn, okay? Although I knew Western astrology, which is why I learned so fast. But when I was with Padilla, sometimes Padilla would say something that I disagreed with and I would speak up. I'd say, wait a minute, and I would say something. And sometimes he would not have a good explanation. Sometimes he was just picking up a prediction psychically. And I said, okay, that's accurate about that person, but show me in the horoscope. And sometimes he really couldn't. He would try, but it was psychic. But other times I said, I would disagree with someone and he would say something he said, and he would say, you take it from me, I have marked this. And whenever he said, you take it from me, I have marked this, I knew to shut my mouth. Because if he had found it from his experience, this was a man to be trusted. He was always experience oriented. He was never connected to the scriptures or what this guy said or what that guy said. And he was truly brilliant. One day, he actually said, I have marked that whenever two planets are in the same degree, they are forming an aspect. This is not traditional Jyotish. And I said to him, I said, you just discovered the essence of Western astrology. This is the way Western astrology works, is that, you know, if planets are 60 degrees, 90 degrees, 120 degrees, 180 degrees, they're forming aspects. So just through his practical experience, he had learned the essence of Western astrology. And he didn't think it was anything special at all. And I thought, my God, this guy is brilliant. There was no way to convey it to him. I just said, well, you just discovered Western astrology. But I couldn't really convey how magnificent to do something like that just from your observation. And that's when I knew this is the way to learn astrology, is to go by your observation. For example, there's another sutra in the book about when a house or a planet is aspected by 2 or 3 malefics, it is devastated. If a planet or a house is aspected by 3 benefics, it's going to be phenomenal. So I have a whole 2 or 3 page sutra on that issue. And it took a long time to figure that out, because in the beginning days, I just noticed, oh, look, Saturn's aspecting that house. And then I'd be doing something else. Oh, look, Mars is aspecting that house. But I never put it together. Hey, there's 3 bad aspects, or a malefic in a house aspected by 2 malefics. That's going to be horrible. A benefic in a house aspected by 1 or 2 benefics is going to be phenomenal. So these are things that took decades to learn and understand.
There is another interesting thing in your horoscope, that is your Lagna is 232 and so is your Mercury. Mercury is the lord of your 2nd and the 5th house, and it is placed in the 6th house, aspected by the 3rd lord Moon. This is also a close conjunction of association of degrees. But the connection is 6-8 connection, Shadashtak. So how would you interpret that in your personal life, especially because this Mercury is aspecting your moon?
Well, you know, when I had the very first astrology reading in India, and I was not very impressed by the astrologer, I didn't stay with him to learn, but he made one good prediction. He said, you're going to write books. And I was 32, and I said, what? He said, you're going to write some books. I said, are you sure? He said, yes. I said, are you positive? How many? He said, a few, 5 or 6. I said, are you positive? He said, look, astrology is not an absolute science. I said, oh. He said, but you will write books. Later on, I came to understand, first of all, Mercury is the exact same degree as the ascendant. So it is very, very strong. It's aspected by a full moon. The moon is past the full moon, but only by a day. So the Mercury in the sixth house is very, very strong for writing. And it's also very strong for healing, because the one thing Padya told me is whenever there's a connection between 3 and 6, you have a healer. When I came back from India the first time, I was in the Saturn return. I was around the age of 31, somewhere. I was in the Saturn return, and I was trying to figure out my career. I had a career earlier, but it wasn't spiritual. I did teach transcendental meditation from the age of 20 to 27. There wasn't really a career. Then I had business because my father was a businessman. Then when I hit the Saturn return and Rahu Dasha, I said, you know what? I've got to have a spiritual career. The career was either going to be healing through healthy diet. It was macrobiotics. I was either going to go into healing and have a restaurant and teach people how to eat to heal their body, or it was going to be astrology. And I said to my best friend, we were out in front of his house, I said, you know, I keep going back and forth. What do you think I should do? And he closed his eyes. He thought for about a minute. He said, you better get the astrology out of your system. And that's what he meant. He wasn't saying become an astrologer. He said, you better get this astrology do it until it's out of your system. Well, I'm 70 now. It's still not out of my system. because the 10th ruler is aspected by Jupiter to the degree, so it's a spiritual career, but Jupiter rules the 8th house, which makes it a metaphysical career. So,
interestingly, your Rahu is in Shatabhisha, and Shatabhisha is a nakshatra that is known for healing. And that's the dasha when you started this astrology, which is eventually a healer's tool.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting thing.
I don't use nakshatras very much. I know people do. I have a sutra in there. I believe that nakshatras are being misused wildly today. There's no mention of nakshatras in Parashara, and the one in terms of nakshatras interpreting a person's life, it's not there. The one book that has it is Brihat Jataka, and all he has is 10 to 15 words for each nakshatra. 10 to 15 words for each nakshatra, and he covers the 27 nakshatras in 3 pages. And you couldn't. So anyway, I don't use nakshatras like that. To me, nakshatras are.
Yet you have made a comment on Vishakha, saying that this is the most horrible nakshatra.
Not horrible. It harms planets, but see, there's a difference between planets can be well placed in certain nakshatras and they can be badly placed in certain ones like Vishakha. But I would not describe a person's personality based on that. The nakshatras, first of all, there's no evidence of any, even the ancient texts. As I said, the one text that has it is not even Parashara, and it's 10 to 15 words per nakshatra. And there's nothing about the nakshatra of the sun and Venus and Jupiter and Saturn. It's just the nakshatras of the moon. Today, people are doing the nakshatras for all the planets, and you don't use nakshatras to say a person's going to have 3 brothers. You don't use nakshatras to say the nakshatra is this, therefore he's going to be an engineer. It's not done, not in my opinion. I know there's different opinions, but yes, I always go by my experience. My experience is if I read a nakshatra description from one of these modern books, I can read it to anybody and they will say, yes, that fits me. When it comes to planets in Vishakha, 9 out of 10 people that I've done horoscopes for, if there's a planet in Vishakha, it's causing troubles. The same thing happened with Aslesha.
That was my next question. You did not find Aslesha to be one of the horrible ones.
First of all, I don't like the word horrible. I just say,
yeah, I understand that.
So here's the story. For about the first 4 or 5 years, maybe even, listen, I came back I wrote my book in 86. Okay. So yeah, it's about 5 or 6 years. I was, I would see a person have the moon in Cancer in its own sign in Aslacia with no malefic aspects. And I would predict a very good moon dasha, and the dasha would be terrible. And then I would see Jupiter exalted in Cancer, and I say, this is going to be a great dasha for Jupiter, and you're going to have good natal effects. They'd have to say, no, I don't have good effects there. I couldn't figure out why. Years later, Dennis Harness was very, very doing a lot of research on nakshatras. And I said, Dennis, tell me the best nakshatras and the most difficult ones. And out of the difficult ones, Vishaka and Aslacia were both there. I didn't know anything about Vishaka. But I said, is this why every time I see the moon in Cancer in Aslacia, they have bad results, and Jupiter in Aslacia? So the nakshatras have effects, there's no question. But the idea that you're going to predict this person's going to marry a partner who's an alcoholic, you cannot do that with nakshatras. This person is going to have confusion in the career his whole life. You cannot do this with nakshatras. Jyotish is the planets in the houses. It's planets in houses, it's yogas, it's aspects. The nakshatras cover the entire horoscope, and they cover everybody. In other words, it's kind of similar to how you have 12 houses. You may not have planets in many houses, but the houses are still there, having an impact. So with the nakshatras, the idea of reading the nakshatra as this is your personality is ridiculous, because I have every single nakshatra in my horoscope. Now, I've only got 9 planets, but all the nakshatras are in the horoscope. So those deities, those archetypes, I can relate to every one of them. That's how I see it. Now, look, this is controversial. Everybody has their own opinion. Be my guest. Have a field day.
I'm sorry, I have a slightly different take on it. Well, just as the 360-degree zodiac has been divided into 12 to give you 12 houses or 12 rashis, so has it been divided in 27 parts, because the moon would go to the next asterism or the next bunch of stars the next night. So that was the original research of the rishis, that how does it affect the human life when a certain planet shifts from one segment to another. The rashis probably came much later.
Yes.
So the original research is nakshatras. And I do think that nakshatras also impart a lot of character to a person. For example, the amount of research that you have done in astrology, I would say most of it is dependent on your moon in Bharani. And then you have 3 planets in Purva Phalguni.
Okay, stop. Let's stop right there. Let's stop right there. 1 out of every 27 people has the moon in Bharani.
Yes. Well, that argument you can say about any planet.
Are they all doing research in astrology?
No. You stopped me from completing my statement. If you would allow me, then you would realize the difference between one person and another. Of course, 1 out of every 27 persons would have his moon in Bharani, but then he may not have an ascendant as Taurus. He may not have the ascendant Lord Venus, which is in Purva Phalguni, which is in its own nakshatra. He may not have Ketu in Purva Phalguni. The critical eye that you have developed over the last 40 years, as you say, is not because of, what I would say is you wouldn't have done it without Ketu supporting Venus, the ascendant lord. And so is the case with Mars. Mars is the Lagna lord for moon Lagna. And that also is in Venus's nakshatra. So moon Bharani, and Bharani is a very intense nakshatra. And that intensity comes out through your Braha Sutras very clearly. So saying that the nakshatras would not impart any influence on the person's character and one can't predict from it, That is not acceptable to me, but of course, you have a right to your opinion, surely.
Yeah. So the thing that I'm saying is I'm not arguing with the moon and Bharani being very intense and very this and very that. But if you want to see me being an astrologer and my astrology and my moksha, it is as clear as day from the horoscope. The moon in the 12th house is the moksha, the 10th ruler aspected by Jupiter. So the nakshatras, to me, they are extra. They add something personality-wise. But I'm going to say it again. If you look at somebody's horoscope and you're not looking at planets and houses, you are not going to know if they're going to be an engineer, an astrologer, a doctor. You're not going to know that from nakshatras. And people today are ignoring the planets and the houses, and they are just using nakshatras, and they are giving readings that way. So look, nakshatras also are much older than the houses. Indeed, they are more religious, if you ask me. They came from the Puranas and the Vedas, and they are barely mentioned in astrological scriptures. I'm going to say that again. The nakshatras are barely mentioned in the.
No, that's not true.
Except,
that's not true.
I'm talking about interpretive wise. Yes, the nakshatras are there for the dashas and bhuktis. They are there for compatibility. They are there for muhurta. But when it comes to interpreting a person's, I mean, if they are, you tell me where it is. All I saw was Brihacharaka.
You see, just as what you're saying, that the key words about these have been written. In fact, in most of the classes, the classics, there is hardly any interpretative work. There are just sutras. Unlike yours, where you've explained your sutra very well, and many times you've illustrated within the horoscope. So, but that's not the way the classics have been written. They have been just written. One keyword can be expanded into a whole book about one nakshatra. That's what I believe.
I see plenty of books that says if Venus is in the 4th house, it means this. If Jupiter is in the 6th house, there's plenty of that in the texts.
Yeah, but that is still. I wouldn't still say it interpretative. I would only say that is a bit of an expansion of the original idea, and some classics later on who wanted to just fill pages and nobody really reads them, they turned out into, Aries means this, and if a planet is in Aries, it would mean this, etc., etc. So that is there, but in the original things like Brihad Parashar Hora Shastra, there is no such thing. The letter writers or the people who made commentaries, they have written in a different way. But interpretative work or illustration with a horoscope, that is missing. That is true. But each keyword has something very special. For example, if a keyword is healer, then you understand what a lot of meaning it can have.
If you can use the nakshatras and they work for you, glory, hallelujah. Look, the Braha Sutras is not about arguing and debating. If you use it and it works, that's great. It doesn't work for me. And so here's the thing. In the same,
no, my take is here, just a slight difference. Maybe you didn't try it hard enough.
So look, in the same way that you're giving your opinion, right? I have lots of people that have read it and said, thank God you said this. I have tried over and over and can't use them. But look, let's move on, because to talk about the nakshatras for the next 30 minutes is a waste of time. If you are the one who knows about the scriptures, I don't. So people can, I'm sure most of the people that watch this, they'll be using nakshatras. I'm not going to convince them otherwise, and I don't care to convince them. What I do care to do is just to give my experience, that's all.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. I agree with you. And if I wrote a book like that, I would also do the same, surely.
Yeah.
I have noticed one statement by you in your book, which says the same thing as I have been saying for a very, very long time. And that is that astrology is a science, it's an art, and it's a craft. I couldn't agree more with you. Yeah. But would you please, for our audience, would you please like to explain what is the science part in it and what is the art part in it and what is the craft part in it. By craft, I don't mean being crafty.
So, look, there were 30, 40 million people that died in World War II. All between the age of 20 and 30, in a span of 5 years, 30 million people died.
Yeah.
Astrologers believe that everything shows up in a horoscope. You're not going to see death in those 30 million people. That's called mass karma. I have a sutra in the book about mass karma.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you.
So yes, but you see, many students, they think that if something has happened to a person, it must be in the horoscope. So things happen to people that cannot be seen in the horoscope, so they will make up something from the horoscope. My favorite goes back 30 years. Somebody had a car accident, and the astrologer couldn't figure out why they had a car accident. And they said, "What color was the car?" And they said, "Blue." He said, "Well, that's the color of Saturn. You shouldn't have bought a Saturn color." So, I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. But the thing is, to answer that question is very difficult because this is a huge issue. Like, for example, here's another one. You're doing the horoscope. You know that the horoscope is accurate because certain things fit. The marriage partner fits exactly as you expect. They have the amount of children that are indicated, but they've achieved nothing. The horoscope is not devastated. It's not like if the horoscope is devastated by Saturn hitting the ascendant and the sun and the moon real tight, that can stop them from achieving anything. But sometimes you see a horoscope which is not devastated. It's not that terrible, and yet the person has not accomplished anything. And so it took me a long time. And then I realized, I stopped the reading. I go, what happened in childhood? What happened in childhood? Because it's not in the horoscope. Then they tell you they got raped, they got assaulted. And then you say you've got to go heal that. You have to go heal that. So that becomes an art form. It becomes, it's more than, just reading the stars. Astrology is a very complex subject. You have to be a counselor, you have to be a healer. And the thing is that people get so attached to concepts, something they've read or some scripture or some concept, so that they let common sense go out the window. Here's another one for you. This is very counterintuitive. It took me a long time. Sometimes you see a horoscope, Moon, Jupiter, Venus conjunct, tightly conjunct, without any malefic aspects. And you go, oh my God, this is the most fantastic horoscope I've ever seen. There's no big afflictions. And Jupiter, Venus, and Moon, they're aspecting each other, maybe in the first house, the 10th house, and you think it's fantastic. And you're doing the reading, and the person is 30 or 35, and you're talking about how great their life is, and you see them start to feel guilty, and they say, well, I better get off my butt and make it happen. So what has occurred? What has occurred is that there's not enough negative energy in the horoscope to give a sense of urgency. So they're lazy. I see a lot of people with Venus right on the ascendant that are lazy. So when I see a horoscope with too much benefic energy, I immediately look to see, is there anywhere in the horoscope that is difficult and challenging and creating some stress? If not, I have a feeling they're going to be lazy. And this is seriously painful because they're 30, I'll be saying, but you're happy, so that's why you're not accomplishing, because you got these benefics. And they say, but I'm not happy because I'm not getting anything done. So these are things that you can't learn, just by, Venus and Mercury are good. It takes a lot of experience. That's what the sutras are about. Things that took me 40 years to get to. There is a book, I know of one other book written by a 70-year-old. It's by a Westerner. It's called Astrology, A Cosmic Science by Isabel Hickey. And when I found that book in 1979, I was in heaven. This was before I knew Hindu. I found this book. It was so packed with wisdom. And I said, this is going to be easy. All I have to do is keep reading this book until I can know everything she knows. And I quickly found out it wasn't possible because there was so much knowledge. And I have my proofreaders, they say, James, I've read the book 5 times and I keep having to go back because they don't necessarily absorb it. She was having a problem. And I said, of course you're having a problem. You're having Saturn opposite Mars. They're exactly opposite. And you're running the Dasha Bhukti. That's in the book. So it's a long process. But the sutras are basically my experience. That's basically what it is. And,
I would also like to.
And I say at the very end of the book, I say, I believe in an afterlife. I believe that when I die, I could be wrong, but I believe in an after. I believe that when I die, I will find out the truth. Are the nakshatras real? Are they not real? Did I get this right about eclipse? Because I tell you what, eclipses, I get hit with eclipses all the time and nothing happens. Eclipses are one of the most ancient, even Shakespeare was talking about eclipses, but I don't care. If they hit me and my wife and they don't do anything, then I don't care. But when I get to the end of life, if there's an astrological guru, I'm going to say, are eclipses, do they do anything? They never did anything to me. And I know astrologers that get their best results from eclipses. So
one of your contemporaries who wrote the book on Hindu astrology just about at your time, Ronnie Gail Ryer, she's talking about eclipses all the time.
Well, she's the one. The quote that I just gave you about eclipses. Okay. We were in Sedona in 2019, and I was talking about that. We were having lunch or dinner, and she said, "Oh, really? I get my best results from eclipses." So I'm not saying she's wrong. I'm just saying this is my experience. I'm going to tell you another one. I'm going to tell you one of the most bizarre experiences I've ever had in astrology, and this is in the introduction to the book. I have Saturn in the 5th house. Now, from the Western side, this is very bad for self-expression and sexual enjoyment and love affairs. Now, when I never did any fast dancing till I was 35 because I was so repressed, so shy, so introverted, but not just introverted, but repressed and just, And when I was reading Isabel Hickey's book, I was 27, 28, and she wrote about Saturn in the 5th house. The person will be sexually repressed. They will have troubles in love affairs, and they won't have fun at bars. They won't have fun at parties. That was me, okay? And I thought, this is brilliant. In my astrological career, I see plenty of horoscopes with Saturn in the 5th house, and I start to tell them what my experience was, assuming they have the same. It almost never works. And to tell you the truth, about 5 or 7 years ago, I stopped even saying it. If they have Saturn in the 5th, I don't say, oh, you have trouble at parties and you're shy and intro. I don't even say it because it doesn't work. But it's in Isabel Hickey's book and it fit my life perfectly. So these are things that it's an art and a craft and you have to make your own way. Here's the other thing. You think you can learn from teachers. You can't learn from teachers. You can take what they say and test them. When I look at the people that have risen to the top of this field, every single one of them studied astrology. They got the information from the teachers and they somehow imbibed it. They took responsibility for it, and they began using their own interpretations and their own experience and using their own mind. And that is, so it is it's an art, it's a craft, it's a science. The science part of it is the planets and the houses, the meanings of them, and yogas. Let's take the yogas. I don't use yogas much. I believe that yogas work for certain people. So Santanam would be looking at a horoscope and he would see Lakshmi yoga. If a person has a planet in the 2nd, 6th, 8th, and 12th house, they would be wealthy. So he saw Lakshmi yoga. I said, yes. And this person whose horoscope yes, she is wealthy, and I never knew why. The horoscope doesn't show wealth, but the Lakshmi Yoga is there. But I can't find that every horoscope that I use with Lakshmi Yoga will work. So I think that there's a psychic element, particularly in India. The Indian astrologers that I came across were incredibly psychic. And so I think that a lot of the times they will see a yoga, the yoga will come up and impress them when it's accurate, whereas it won't impress them if it's not active in the person's life. That's just my opinion. But some people only use yogas. Some people, I tend to focus more on the planets and the houses.
You mentioned in your book something about composite charts for compatibility. That's an area which is practically unheard of in India, at least. I heard it only once, about 15 years ago, but that's just once by only one astrologer, a German astrologer who was doing Western as well as the Hindu Jyotish. Could you please explain the rationale behind the composite chart and how it works? Because you have written very gloriously about that in your book.
I will, if you can tell me why the sun is red, the sky is blue, and trees are green. I cannot tell you why it works. I do not know. I don't have a clue why it works. First of all, this is a Western technique. You're talking about, there's two kinds of, one is called synastry, which is if your Venus is 10 degrees of Libra and the partner's Saturn is 10 degrees Libra, you're going to feel very restricted around that person. If your Mercury is 3 degrees Aries and her Mars is 3 degrees Aries, every time you say something, she's going to argue. That's synastry. That's pretty simple. The other one, I mean, it's based on the midpoints of the planets. So if Jupiter is 2 degrees Aries and the other person's Jupiter is 2 degrees Libra, the midpoint of those two Jupiters is going to be 2 degrees of Cancer. So they just take the planets, they take all of the planets and they, this person's sun and that person's sun, and they add everything together and divide by 2. And basically what you have is the midpoints of each person's sun, the midpoints of each person's moon. It works very well. I've used it. For me, I find that it works better than natal astrology. Natal astrology is great, but if a person has a really strong willpower and they are willing to work really hard and do therapy, they can alter, they can have some free will to make things different or better. But when you have two people together where it's indicating arguing, or two people together where it's indicating manipulation, you can't stop it, because the composite chart is the combination of what happens when these two people come together. It doesn't tell me she's manipulative. It doesn't tell me he's manipulative. It says when these two people come together, manipulation will occur. So if it turns out that the man is manipulating the woman, and you can get a hold of this guy and get him to change it, then what'll happen is the woman will start manipulating, because it's the two horoscopes together that form this kind of pattern that occurs. But why the midpoints work, I have no idea why. There is, I will say this, there's a whole field of astrology, Uranian, it's called Uranian astrology. Ebertin was the man, I think, that spoke about it. And it's all about midpoints. I tried using those midpoints, for transits but it was too technical for me. It was too difficult. But some people make predictions on not when a transit hits, not when like you might have the sun and Mars. Maybe the sun is in Aries and Mars is in Libra, and these people will notice that when a transit hits Cancer, hitting those two, the midpoints of those, something happens. You know how many fields of astrology there are? This is another thing. When the horoscope doesn't work, well, guess what? it might show up in Gemini. My second marriage showed up in Gemini. It didn't show up elsewhere. It might show up in Chinese astrology. I mean, this is such a brutal field. And you have to be able to say the three most important words, I don't know. It's not clear.
Well, there is something that you know that I would like to pick on, and that is you just mentioned the word free will. And people working very hard can overcome something. But in another instance, you said that retrograde planets function much like agents of free will.
In the sense that you might see a horoscope with 4 planets in the 6th house, and the 6th house is very strong, and you think the person is going to be a healer. But what happens is, because the ruler is retrograde, and because of human nature is such that you don't become an adult until the Saturn return at 29 to 31. So in the first 29 years, you're not thinking so rationally. Oh, I like that, I'll do that. Oh, I like that, I'll do that. So the person with the strong 6th house, but the ruler is retrograde, because the 6th house is held back, it's repressed a little bit, it's passive, the person may not even notice the talents they have. Then when they get to the age of 28, 29, 30, they start to realize I have big talents there. And so then they can do it or not do it. Or a person, the ruler of the 5th house is retrograde. I will never predict if a person's going to have children if that ruler is retrograde. Jupiter might aspect the 5th house, but if it's retrograde, they may not, because it's passive. It gives them a choice. If the 7th ruler is retrograde, they may not marry till they're 40. It's more passive. So I'm not saying that everybody is going to avoid marriage if their ruler is retrograde, but there's more of a choice there. It's more passive. Like we use the term when bells go off. You know, the term is, when are bells going to go off for me? Meaning I see someone, I fall madly in love. That's not going to happen so much for a person with a retrograde 7th house, retrograde ruler. They won't necessarily have love at first sight because it tones it down. That's all I meant about that.
You're very right. I am one example. Seventh Lord retrograde.
And you didn't get married, or you didn't want to, or late?
I did get married, but didn't fall in love so easily with anyone.
No, of course.
That's
retrograde. Yeah.
But my take, and my teachers have also taught me this, and I believe this is true in my experience, that retrograde planets actually represent some unfinished agenda from the previous life, which means, to my mind, that this is exactly the opposite of free will. You will be made to do certain things which you left undone in the previous life, which means you don't have enough free will around that planet. How do we reconcile our ideas?
First of all, I agree wholeheartedly with you. I believe that if Jupiter is retrograde, the person's going to spend a life really focused on Jupiter. If Venus is retrograde, they're going to spend a life focused on love matters. These are semantics, though, the terms of free will. There is no free will. The universe is a dream. It's an illusion. There's only an appearance of free will. And I was thinking about this morning. The reason, I'm going to tell you some things that happened in my life. There's no free will. 2 weeks before I'm leaving India, the man says, "Young man, what are you doing?" What if the shopkeeper had not come up and said, "Young man, what are you doing?" I would have gotten the books, they would have been useless. I would have come home and forget about Hindu astrology. It wouldn't have happened. So there was something that was destined to happen. Then you take the Braha Sutras, okay? So in my Brigu reading of 1996, it said I would be an astrologer, I would be connected to India, I would have one son, I would have a second marriage. And it said, you'll write several intelligent books, you will write one historical book. This is the Brigu. Up until 6 months ago, it was obvious. My historical book was Ancient Hindu Astrology for the Modern Western Astrologer. It was the first easily understandable book in the West. And I got letters from all over the world. Thank you, we can finally use that system. I thought that was the historical book, okay? But now, to me, the Braha Sutras, which the title is a lousy title for people now because they don't even know what the Braha Sutras means. But as the decades go by, it's a brilliant title. So how did the Braha Sutras come about? The Braha Sutras came about because I stopped doing workshops 15 years ago. I get an email from this lady and she says, James, people want to see you at the conference. Well, I've heard that for 15 years. But then she says to me, I got in the taxi cab and the cab driver said, yeah, I know about those conferences. I'm not going back to those conferences until James Braha goes. Now, when she said that, I said, oh God, I don't want to be the person to stop people from, as much as I did not want to go, I said, Dennis, I'll go. I want to go to the conference this year. So I get to the conference and I say, is there anybody here that was a taxi cab driver? No hands go up. So that guy wasn't there. Without my going to the conference, I wouldn't have worked for a solid year on this, and the Braha Sutras wouldn't be written. The whole thing is a dream. This is not my work. This is the work of the universe. There is no, and you know, when this book first came out, the sales were less than I wanted. I thought, gee, I know I've been telling people, so sales should be bigger. So I went to the Bhagavad Gita and it said, look, you have the right to action. You do not have the right to the fruits of action. So then I was complaining to I send a lot of people for yagyas. And I was complaining to Marie that the sales aren't, the reviews are fantastic, but I'm not selling as many books as I want. I didn't know this, but she went to the yagya people and they did a yagya for me. And she told me, but it went in one ear and out the other because I didn't pay for it. They were doing it for me for free because I send them so many people. So I forgot that she did a yagya. Then the other day, I get this email and here's the pictures of your yagya for better book sales. I said, Marie, what's this about? She said, I told you we did a yagya, right? Right around the time that they did the yagya, the sales doubled or tripled. They just doubled or tripled right during the time of the whole thing. It's not us doing any of it. It's even when I say that the person has free will and they can work on themselves, there's no free will there. They have the tendency to be willing to do the work, the self-improvement. They're born with the planets that way. They asked Robert De Niro, they said, how did you be such a great actor? He said, it was luck. They said, what do you mean it was luck? You worked so hard. He said, yeah, I was lucky that I wanted to work hard. It's the same thing. Everything that's going on, it's not us doing it. We take credit for it, but if you take credit for it, you suffer. You'll suffer.
James, we are nearing the end of this discussion. Are you ready for an unsolicited advice?
Unsolicited advice?
Yes.
Okay.
I went through your website and there you have mentioned the mantras for various planets. And you have also recited them probably in your own voice. My advice is that the mantras that you have written, if you would write them with diacritical marks, the real word would be clear to the reader. That is one part of the advice. Because when I read Japa Kusum, etc., I found that this was not the way we would pronounce in India. And without the diacritical marks, one wouldn't understand the real word there, real character there. The other one is that when you are advising your clients to recite a mantra, it would be good if they recite after they listen to somebody who knows the mantra very well and is probably from India and who knows Sanskrit well, so that the client gets to know the exact pronunciation, because just as you have advised in the book, the whole thing depends on the vibrations of the sound. So the sound produced must be the accurate one. And the accurate sound, I know it would be very difficult for the Westerners to pronounce that, but if they follow somebody else's example, they listen to it very often, or they start simulating it with the other person on the audio, then maybe the whole thing can come out much better and closer to the original meaning of the sounds there.
Okay. So I have some advice. My teacher, Padia, was the one who gave me the mantras, and believe me, yes. So I would advise you to go to if you have access to Bombay, to go to Padia and talk with him about the pronunciations, because that's basically what I use. And when I do go to yagyas and I hear the priests chanting the prayers, I hear the exact same sound. So
I know the way the tongue twists in India and the way the tongue twists in USA is very different. So it's probably not really possible for people who are trained in other languages to follow the Sanskrit properly. But with the hard work, maybe it can be stimulated closely.
I will check.
Yagyas are different because it's the Pandit who performs it.
I will check it out. I'm actually about to make the website is very old. I'm in the process of now making a new website. So I will check and see. But I've heard plenty of other people pronounce it the same way. So it could also be the ears, because when I hear the priests, it's exactly what is on mine is what I hear them saying. So, but I will take it under advisement, and I'll see if I can find something that's any different.
Thank you.
Those mantras, I think I wrote in the original book that it has to do with the vibrations, but there's different kinds of mantras, and I think those are actually more devotional. There's some that are what do they call them? Vedic mantras, and then there's some that are devotional. I believe those are devotional.
No, the Vedic mantras are also devotional. The other ones are called Bij mantras. They don't have a meaning. They just have sounds.
Right.
But the Vedic mantras are essentially devotional, but at the same time, the sounds they produce are important, and they must be used that way.
I agree 100%. Yeah. I will definitely check it out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
If the audience wants to ask any questions from James or me, they're welcome.
Oh, and let me say this also. So Westerners can get the book from Amazon. It's in hardcover or paperback. In India, the easiest way, I mean, you can get them at Amazon in India, but they're very expensive. But you can get the ebook on Google Play or Apple Books, Barnes and Noble. Those are the three places I think they can get them cheaper in India. But yeah, if you have questions, be my guest.
Yeah, and I must say this is a brilliant book. Even if there are some places, in fact, I could find probably only 10 such examples out of those 216 where I wouldn't agree or where I would disagree very strongly. Yeah. But then the rest of it is absolute on the mark sutras, and they are very useful for beginners, middle levels, as well as the advanced students of astrology. So I very heartily recommend this book to everyone in India, as well as whoever is listening to this. Any questions, please?
Vinay, I will start with the question which is there in the chat.
Maybe you could take over.
Sure. No, Vinay, I think you are good, but I just wanted to make sure we are here. So Anjan is asking a question. So Anjan, you can unmute yourself if you want to speak about your question. I'm reading what Anjan is asking. The question is for James, saying, how do you interpret lives of people born in the same big hospital at about the same time?
Well, the horoscopes are going to be very similar. If the thing is, the main Varga charts that I use, the divisionals, I don't use all 16 or 21 Vargas, but I do use the Navamsha and the Dasamsha. And if they're born a few minutes, the Navamsha and the Dasamsha, they change every 15 minutes or every 18 minutes. So a lot of times a person could be born at the very end of one ascendant in the Navamsha or Dasamsha. Other than that, it would be a very similar reading. And that's when astrology becomes an art because the psychic element comes in. So when you're doing a horoscope, the two charts may be the same, but yet when you're doing the chart for this person, you're getting things psychically, whether you know it or not. That's what I would say. Now, when I get the horoscopes of twins, which are the exact same, if the Navamsha and the Dasamsha are the same as well, I will actually tell them, if I were you, I would go to two different astrologers. I'll do this one, the other person does that one. Or I would say, I'll do the chart of this child now, and then contact me 2 months later, and I'll do the chart, because the chart's going to be the same, but the interpretation may vary due to the psychic elements that you pick up. Because when I'm doing a chart, there's always a certain amount of psychic energy. Sometimes I'll be looking at a horoscope and suddenly I'm thinking healing, and I'm thinking healing, where's the healing? I haven't seen healing in this horoscope, and I have to go digging to find out why that's showing up. It just pops up psychically.
Yeah, that's a good
Can
one.
I add something? Can I
Yeah.
say something about this question? It's similar to what James has answered. Slightly different answer could be that everything in chart reading depends on what we call Desh, Kal, and Patra. If the child is the same, if the child is born at the same time in the same hospital, their parents would certainly be different. So while Desh and Kal would be same, but the Patra would change. So one could be the son of a king, the other could be the son of a pauper. So the whole reading would shift enormously. And then I tried a technique that Ronnie first introduced. So the credit should go to Ronnie Gail Ryer. She suggested, in the case of twins, or I suppose if it so happens that the two children were born in the same hospital, they would come to you together with their horoscopes. She said that from the same horoscope, you take the 11th house as the elder child and the third house as the younger child. And whenever I tried it, it seems to work. Because even in twins, there may be a difference of half a minute, 1 minute, or 2 minutes, or sometimes 5 to 10 minutes. So the charts would be, as you said, they would be nearly the same, even Navansha, Dashansha, even sometimes even D60 is the same. So at that time, the 11th house and third house business could work.
I also think that, there are different souls that have had different past lives and different experiences and things like that. And I believe that there is such a thing as a soul that is more evolved, maybe had more lifetimes or more successful. And then there's souls that are younger souls. The horoscope could be the same. An older soul might make something completely different out of, but there's the fact that you're raised. I mean, you could have the same horoscope, and sometimes a person goes through experiences with the parents that I don't see in the horoscope, and they've had they've had difficult upbringing or difficult parents, but it's not showing. That could be my missing it, or it could be just that it doesn't show, but that's going to have an effect on the person. But that's why I say, if you're an astrologer, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, you are definitely developing psychic ability. And I've read some books where it said, you can study all you want, you can learn all you want, but it's when at a certain point, the psychic energy comes up. And I'll tell you, over the 4 decades, there came a point in my 60s, I'm 70 now, there came a point where suddenly the astrology began to come together where I could look at the horoscopes and really know what was going on versus decades ago where I'm struggling to know. And I guess it's just a result of experience. I remember getting a letter. I used to get lots of letters from Indians after my book came out. And one of them said, when you get to the Jupiter Dasha, you won't even have to look at the horoscope, which I was hoping would be true. It was not true. But the concept was an interesting one. It's interesting to me because it's in the Saturn Dasha. Saturn is my best planet. Started about 7 years ago. In the Saturn Dasha, I mean, even these days, I'll be looking at a horoscope that's very confusing. And I just go, God, what is this? And then as soon as the person shows up for the reading, the chart comes alive. And I say, what is this? Why is this happening? Because I didn't do anything, I don't know.
Yeah, that happens. That surely happens.
It does. That's why one of the early sutras, the first 10 or 15 sutras, have faith in the session. Even in the early days when you don't know what the hell's going on, have faith that when the person comes to you, they will let you know what they really want to know and you'll be able to help them. I don't know why that is, but
if your intention is to help rather than extract money.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I'd just like to add, Vinayji and James over there, during our Jyotish Mela 2020, which is starting June 2nd, we have an extensive discussion on this particular topic, which is how to analyze a chart of twins by Gudrun Lewis.
Well, this is also why Krishnamurti, I was told that Krishnamurti made the KP system because of twins. I don't know. That's what I heard.
Yeah, so we are going to discuss this particular topic during our conference as well, because undoubtedly this topic is, needs to be understood because that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, thank you. I have twins, and that is one area of tremendous, unexplainable things, right? The two kids are completely different, yet the natal chart is just about the same.
Wow. Yeah, that's one that I'm hoping when I die, I said, what the hell's going on with twins?
No, I think this is a big myth that astrology can solve every problem or can say everything about it, about one's past, present, and future. There must be other forces. There must be other things working behind the scene to give it more meaning. So we astrologers can't be really boasting that our astrology can tell you everything about everything and all the times. So that's probably a myth.
You're talking about one of the sutras. Remember,
yes.
Remember the limitations of astrology.
Yes.
I had a client. He was going on vacation with his family. The wife had 4 or 5 really bad transits, progressions, dasha bhukti. I said she should not go. She went, there was not a hitch. There was no problem. Now, if that happened often, I would quit. I wouldn't want to be, I would quit. It happens once in a blue moon. It happens once in a while, and there's nothing you can do about it. And like I say, there could be something in Gemini, there could be something in Western astrology, there could contradicting it, there could be, there's all kinds of different systems of astrology.
I just wanted to add one comment, James. You said that Saturn is your best planet. Look at all the blue. You're wearing a dark blue shirt. Your chair appears blue. There's all sorts of blue books. You got that, and your glasses are also blue rimmed. There's a lot of blue in your life.
Listen, I'm in the Saturn Dasha. When I was in India the second time, by that time I knew how great my Saturn was. And I said to Padia, I said, what do you think my Saturn Dasha will be like? He said, you make a lot of money and it'll be spiritual. So flash forward 40 years. the Saturn Dasha comes, and suddenly I'm doing all these video YouTubes for Anuradha and all different Indian hosts. I'm doing lots of videos. And now I write this book. I was not planning to write this book. I wasn't planning to spend a year updating that book. But on top of that, our house flooded. Our house flooded. Salt water. So we decided to move. We sold the house, went to North Carolina looking to rent a place in Asheville or somewhere near Asheville. There were no rentals whatsoever. We didn't want to buy. Some guy told us, oh, there's a Hindu temple up there. I said, well, what do I want with a Hindu temple? He told us because I do Hindu astrology. I said, I'm not religious like that. What do I want with a Hindu temple? The next thing you know, I am living 1,000 feet. I'm on Mount Soma. I'm living 1,000 feet away from not just a Hindu temple, a Vedic Hindu temple. And this priest, Panditji, is outrageous. This man is so pure. If I told you some of the stories of how pure this man is, but this is a picture of me in the temple with Panditji. Now, my spiritual life, I became completely satisfied with non-duality. Advaita, I studied with Sailor Bob Adamson, who was a student of Nisargadatta. My spiritual search ended in 2005. So how am I going to be religious or spiritual? The next thing you know, I'm on Mount Soma, and I am sending so many people for yagyas. And every time that Panditji is doing a Havan, we run to, so I'm telling you, there's no free will. The Saturn Dasha, it's aspected by Jupiter. It rules the 9th house. I mean, I have no, I'm not religion searching. That part is over. All I do now is whatever I can do. It's more like I'm a karma yogi. All I do now is try to help other astrologers just with what I've learned. It's not all going to be perfect. They're going to have to find out what is perfect and what is not. But when I'm helping people, I feel good. When I'm not doing that, if I'm just, I think I'll just do nothing and hang out, I get bored and depressed. So I keep working.
James's Saturn is in Hasta Nakshatra. That belongs to Moon. So no great wonder that the flooding took place. I'm not saying that I would have predicted it beforehand, but it seems to fit.
But you could have predicted it. You know how you could have predicted it?
Yes.
When I hit the Venus Bhukti.
Yeah.
Every time I hit a Venus Bhukti, Venus is my worst planet. Venus is in the 4th house. It's right next to Ketu and right next to the 12th house ruler. Every time I have come to Venus, there has been either termites or mold or flooding or something. So in fact, I was telling a neighbor about this, about it fits my horoscope perfectly. She started telling people, James was the one who caused the flooding.
So James, before we are flooded with complaints of too long an interview, we should probably put an end to it.
As every time the session was over with Santanam, he would go buzz. I thought it was buzz, B-U-Z. No, it's bus.
Bus is the Hindi, though he was a South Indian. But I've read his books with great interest.
As we are closer to closing the session, just wanted to ask anybody, do anybody have any burning question which can be a last question? If not, we will go to close the session. So it doesn't look like there is any burning question right now. So I would like to really say thanks, James, for being here, for all of your questions. I hope this helps us, giving you more people reading through, understanding this. So it's all live on the YouTube. So we have many people are also watching from there. So I do want to read one thank you note, which is coming from the Marian Cook. saying thank you for such a lively discussion and looking forward to reading your book, James. And thank you for your continue and updating and sharing of such a precious knowledge and experience.
My pleasure.
Great. And thanks a lot, Vinayji, for your time and be able to be here, ask all the questions. So it was such a beautiful discussion and such an engaging discussion, I will say, among us, especially some of the parts of the Western, as well as how people are perceiving it, how, in a Vedic astrology things are. So it will be very helpful for people to look through and bring their own experience. So thanks a lot for both of your time. It will be very helpful for the people who love astrology.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meenakshi.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you want, I can do closing mantra.
Go ahead, please, if you like to.
Sure. Just give me a second.
Sure.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om.
Thank you, Satyaji. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.